My next guests are Glenn Forbes and Jenni Donohoo. Glenn Forbes is a school principal and school improvement coach in Queensland, Australia. Forbes has been an educator since 2000, moving from classroom to teaching to principalship over the span of his career. His principal experience ranges from small one-teacher rural schools through to leading large, diverse, and complex metropolitan schools. Glenn's strong belief in cultivating collective teacher efficacy and establishing a culture of high expectations has resulted in marked improvement in various schools. Glenn is a member of the Queensland Association of State School Principals. He chairs the curriculum subcommittee and serves as president of Ipswich Branch. He has been the recipient of the QASSP Travelling Scholars grant, which he used to further his knowledge of collective teacher efficacy construct. His schools have been recognized at the Showcase Awards for Excellence in Schools and also for excellence in parent and community engagement and excellence in early and primary years education. Glenn is presented at the World Education Summit with Jenni and has been a keynote speaker at several conferences. Several of his articles have been published in the Queensland Principal Journal, and he's been a member of the Menzies School Leadership Incubator Advisory Board, which has been tasked with building a pipeline of school leaders equipped to lead and grow collective efficacy. Jenni Donohoo, PhD, is a professional learning facilitator, author, and researcher. Jenni's been an educator for more than 25 years with experience in elementary, secondary, and post-secondary settings. She has multi-year partnerships with numerous organizations and government agencies where she works alongside system and school leaders supporting high-quality professional learning designed to improve outcomes for all students. Her areas of focus include collective teacher efficacy, collaborative inquiry, and metacognition. Jenni is a five-time best-selling author, and her books have been translated into several languages. As a director of the Jenni Donohoo Center for Collective Efficacy, she has been recognized internationally as an educational thought leader. Jenni's been a keynote speaker at conferences, including World Edu Lead, Raising Student Achievement, Annual Visible Learning, Corwin's Women in Education, and the LEAP Conference in Australia. Jenni received a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Art History and honors of Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from the University of Windsor and a master's degree in education from the University of Windsor. She earned her PhD in education from the joint program at the University of Windsor, Brock University, and Lakehead University, all in Ontario, Canada. Well, welcome to the podcast, Glenn and Jenni.
Thank you, Dana.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to start off with the question I ask everyone. Tell me about a time where each of you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out. And I'll start with you, Glenn.
Thanks, Dana. It's great to be on your podcast today, and it's great to join Jenni once again to share a little bit more information about ourselves. That's a great question. When have we crawled out of the trenches or managed to work our way out of the trenches? And I feel like for me, it's so relevant because we're in the 8th week at the moment of a 10-week term, and in Queensland we have 4 10-week terms, and the cycle of work changes over the course of the term, and by the 8th week, particularly in a period where we're reporting on student progress, we're in a period where the workload has dramatically increased. Students are tired. It's winter in Australia at the moment, so there's some winter sickness being felt throughout our schools, and it's just a really, really busy time. I have to give a shout out to 2 teachers actually at my school, Mitch and Ella, and look, they had a quick and simple idea that we could try as a staff to really elevate out of the trenches, and it was just to stop and do a staff wellbeing activity, which actually was a 5-kilometre run along the river in Brisbane. And whilst it was a simple idea, that pause, that break, that ability to kind of reconnect and do some physical activity gave us a chance to rest, reflect, and then just reset for the remaining weeks in the term. And, Mitch and Ella, shout out to you both. Elevating out of the trenches with just such a simple activity helped give us a little bit of motivation to work through the last couple of weeks of the term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really relevant. I would say when you're kind of in those doldrums of the term and, there's all that work and, making sure that you're keeping on track with student learning. And yeah, that's a great idea. People don't necessarily have to run that 5K. They can walk it definitely, I'm sure. But just getting out in the nature, right, and being recharged is a great idea. I'm glad you elevated their voices. Um,
Yeah, and look, whatever it is, that was just something that they wanted to try. But whatever it is for your school or in your context, I think having workload front of mind is it's an important consideration for contemporary leadership.
hmm. How about you, Jenny? When were you in the trenches and managed to crawl out?
Well, I'm thinking about an experience with a PLC at a secondary school who were really focused on trying to improve student outcomes and identifying some really critical student learning needs. And that's really difficult work. Like if you're in the trenches, you're collaborating with others, trying to figure out what you can do to make things better for your students.
Mhm.
And that really starts with identifying what they need. I think what pulled me out was how much these teachers were invested, much like Glenn's story, and how they were willing to collaborate, spend the extra time needed, learn from their failures, experiment and try things in their practice. And I felt really like, as a district office person coming into a high school,
Mhm.
gaining access sometimes is difficult.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things that I really modeled was what happens here stays here.
Mhm.
I'm not going to go back to the district office and talk about what's happening here. And I think that that helped to build a sense of trust. And at the end of that school year, when I was invited to the year-end pool party by the social studies department head, I knew I had been successful, because I felt like they had included me as one of their own, even though I was district office
Mhm.
and really just trying to support them. So that to me was a success story. And even more importantly, they had seen incredible measurable gains in student achievement on the annual standardized test. And I'm not saying that's the only measure of success, but that was one of the positive outcomes that resulted from this really high functioning PLC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it really goes a long way when they have appreciated working with somebody from the district office, right? To invite them to a social event. Yeah, I think that really showed their appreciation. So, you all are here to talk about your book, Collective Impact, and it's about overcoming 12 enemies of teacher efficacy. And I'd like you to just talk to me about some of the key sources of teacher collective efficacy and how you all really came to writing the book. We'll talk about different parts of the book, but how did you all really become co-authors to start off with?
Jenny, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Okay. Well, what I appreciate about my partnership with Glenn is that he's in the schools every day, in the principalship, doing the work.
Hmm.
I focus sometimes at a fault too heavily on research and theory.
Hmm.
And so having Glenn's practical voice as a partner in writing and saying, just that bringing that experience of walking the walk every day made it a very valuable writing and learning opportunity for me. We met each other online when Glenn was working on some research in his school. And then we connected when he came to the United States and participated in a facilitated 2-day learning session. And we got to know each other, and he invited me back to his school in Brisbane. And so it was during one of those times that he said, we should really write about these enemies of efficacy that we had been talking about. And I think that's my recollection of how the partnership started. Glenn, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, and it was great, Jenny. I guess, and Dana, for your listeners, it was fantastic working with Jenny, collaborating on the enemies of efficacy. We have to give a shout out also to Tommy Thompson, who coined the phrase "the enemies of efficacy." And the fun part in writing the book was trawling through the research and really thinking what were the things or what were the barriers that sometimes get in the way of progress or get in the way of building that strong sense of collective efficacy. And I guess Jenny and I, through our writing process, identified a huge number of enemies. You know, we ended up with a list of over 20 enemies, and I guess we then worked through a process to really distill down, in our experience in schools and with teachers and leaders, what do we see as the I guess main enemies, which is where the dirty dozen came from, the
Mm-hmm.
12 enemies that we've identified. And we then thought, well, that's great. We've identified the things that we know impact on efficacy,
Mm-hmm.
but how do we overcome those? So that was the second challenge, thinking of some really practical ways that teachers and leaders could overcome these enemies in their context.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So tell me about a few of the enemies. You don't have to give away all 12, but um, talk to me a little bit about which ones that you'd like to highlight in terms of maybe the most common enemies.
Do you want to get started, Jenny, again?
Sure. I was going to say different enemies resonate with different groups
Mm-hmm.
in a different context. And that's one of the strengths in the feedback we've gotten so far around the manuscript. And we encourage people not to read it straight through, but to go to the table of contents, look at the 12 enemies and think, okay, which ones are at play here in my current context? And I do have my favorites. And, the ones that I have encountered. Magnitude probably is one of them. The idea that when we're forming efficacy judgments, one of the things that the psychologists show, and this is really the work of Albert Bandura, who coined the term collective efficacy and did many studies in education dating back for decades in schools. What they show is that as we're forming judgments about what we believe we're capable of achieving, we take into account our perception of magnitude. How big is this challenge?
Mm-hmm.
And I've encountered that often in my work. People are faced with a multitude of challenges that they perceive as too big to handle.
Mm-hmm.
And so we tackle that from an idea of perspective
Mm-hmm.
over magnitude. And we identify some ways that school leaders, including teacher leaders, formal leaders, or instructional coaches, can really help teams deal with their perception of magnitude in ways that can help them overcome that.
Mm-hmm.
So magnitude might be one of my favorites, Glenn. Which one out of the 12 would you say is something that resonates with you most?
Um, Mine, and Dana, it's so interesting when you're talking with school leaders how often the enemies come up. For example, you might be chatting with a group and they're talking about a PLC or some work that they're doing on their action plan, and they'll just be expressing a sense of frustration. And coincidentally, that's actually one of the enemies. It feels like, Glenn, we're fragmentation. Like it feels like we're fragmented, which of course then leads to frustration. And we introduce focus over fragmentation as an enemy of efficacy and also the antidote, so to speak. And
Mm-hmm.
there are a range of little moves that we have in the book that share how we can generate higher levels of focus and a more focused approach to overcome fragmentation as an enemy of efficacy.
Mm-hmm.
Another one of my favorites is positivity over negativity, with negativity being the enemy and elevating positivity essentially to overcome negativity as the enemy. And there's a range of little strategies that we introduce that leaders or teachers can utilize to help combat that enemy in their context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing a few of those. And, I advise people who want to pick up the book, like you said, you can choose some of those topics rather than reading straight through. So that leads me to asking about the chapter structure. So the chapter structure you chose is compelling because you introduce or how to counteract each of the enemies of efficacy. Efficacy. For example, there's feedback over blame, perspective over magnitude. The structure is user friendly and opens the door for leaders to use some of the micro moves that you suggest taking. Is there a chapter that you all wrote that's your favorite to dig into?
Well, I'm glad that you brought up the chapter structure because as Glenn and I were collaborating, and what was it for over about a year, Glenn, I think it took us
Yeah.
to finish the manuscript, and it evolved over time. And one of the things that was unique for me as a previous author of five other books was that we maintained the same structure in each chapter,
Mhm.
which became, I think I love the consistency in that we introduce our theory of action. And that is exactly what you just said, Dana. It's like feedback over blame or perspective over magnitude. And then we describe the enemy, tie it to research, why it's an enemy, and stories. And then we offer the ways to overcome it, which are three micro moves. And then the chapter ends with a reproducible that is a planning for action kind of template, which just encourages people to think through how they would utilize or enact the micro moves. A favorite chapter for me might be there's I have different chapters that I like for different reasons. It might be a better way for me to answer what's my favorite micro move.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. And so what I love is, you know what? I'll pick this one. Under the chapter interdependence over isolation, because people are often isolated geographically or by department or for whatever reason within a
Mhm.
school. One of my favorite micro moves really comes from Judith Warren Little, who was the dean at the Faculty of Education at the University of California at Berkeley. Her research interest was always to what degree do teachers out of class collaborations account for positive consequences within their classrooms? And she created a framework for examining collaboration in
Mhm.
which she describes the term joint work as truly interdependent,
Mhm.
where
Mhm.
teachers depend on each other to solve those issues, just like that high functioning PLC that I mentioned earlier in the podcast, where people are identifying those dilemmas and coming together to solve problems in an interdependent way. And the micro move that really kind of started from her work, what she notices in teachers' collaborations is when a problem of practice is surfaced, often it gets deflected, joked about, or normalized. And
Mhm.
she said a simple strategy that anyone can use that she has seen in her research that has led to deeper conversations, which get to joint work and problem solving, is the simple strategy of extending an invitation to say more. So
Mhm.
when a teacher does share that problem of practice, rather than deflecting it or joking about it, it's the simple way of saying, can you tell me more about that?
Mhm.
Or let's talk more about that, or questioning a little bit about it. Then that leads to a deeper conversation, which results in more sustainable and impactful change. And it's such a simple strategy, I think, is why I appreciate it so much. Anyone can do that. That's simple, extending an invitation to tell me more about that issue.
Mhm. Mhm. Do you have a favorite chapter, Glenn?
Um, Touching on what I'd mentioned before
Mhm.
about the chapter on negativity and
Yeah.
the theory of action, if we elevate positivity, we can overcome negativity as an enemy of efficacy. And
Mhm.
one of the micro moves in that chapter is leveraging the power of the narrative. It's one of my favorites. I talk about this one all the time. And Jenny, along with John Hattie and Rachel Ells, wrote a paper in 2018, and within that paper they had a sentence, and it I just keep coming back to this sentence. It's so I find it so so compelling. It reads, the greatest power that principals have in schools is that they control the narrative of the school.
Yeah.
Therefore, a worthwhile activity or a worthwhile consideration is to construct the collective efficacy narrative for your school or your context. So the micro move is simply as a team or as a group, in 100 words or less, describe your collective efficacy narrative. Be really clear and succinct as you answer the following question. How would you grow collective efficacy within your school? What obstacles would you have to overcome? And how will people see themselves within the narrative? And look, I realize it's 2025, so if anyone was given that activity, they'll probably put it straight into AI. So see what AI comes up with, but then spend that time
Mhm.
collectively building I guess, an understanding of what the collective efficacy narrative for your school is going to mean. What are the obstacles that your community or your school needs to overcome? What role do you play? And then how collectively will you build that sense of positive impact?
Hmm. Well, thanks for sharing that piece on really that leverage that principals have over the narrative. I wanted to ask for those who are interested in using this book in their work, is there a particular group of educators or people in a particular role that this book is for?
I think it's for just about anyone. Um, Although we often address in a generic way the term leaders, we refer
Hmm.
to school leaders. The way we view leadership in the education system is that everybody
Hmm.
has the power to be a leader in their own way. And we view classroom teachers as leaders as well. So I think for me, the book it has a wide range of readers. If you're interested in education, higher education, universities, um, anybody in the field of education, I think could benefit. And as we were writing it, I had a thought. I think it was my thought, Glenn, or maybe it was your thought, but we really do address these micro moves for building efficacy. But we thought these are just really good leadership practices, whether the end results is building efficacy, which is likely to happen, or
Hmm.
if it's just I'm a beginning school leader, I'm a brand new assistant principal, or I'm a principal with a few years experience. These are really good leadership strategies or moves that anyone can use under any circumstance.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I guess, Dana, for me to add in to Jenny's answer, it would be relevant for school principals also and school leaders, particularly if they're implementing a reform initiative or
Hmm.
a particular improvement strategy as a reflective tool. I thought this strategy would have worked by now, but it isn't. What enemy might be at play? Um, is the way I pitched the initiative clouded with ambiguity?
Hmm.
Are we avoiding a difficult conversation, and instead of taking action, we're just avoiding the elephant in the room? Is there uncertainty around some of the finer details in the proposal that we're pitching, or the action plan, and how can we, and of course, is that uncertainty leading to a decrease in teacher well-being? Do we have a team culture where some of the staff are feeling judged for their efforts, and how can we increase psychological safety over judgment?
Okay, Glenn,
What?
you're giving away all of our enemies.
Oh, I'm giving too much
I'm
away.
just kidding. I'm kidding. But you did hit on quite a few. You hit on judgment as an enemy, uncertainty, avoidance, ambiguity. And then they've
Yeah.
already heard about isolation, fragmentation, negativity, and magnitude. So
Wow,
we've
we're
only
getting
got
through
a
them
few
all.
left for the people to discover. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I do.
I'll stop talking now.
It's all right.
I think the point though, like you can be buried in the trenches
Mhm,
with any of those enemies, and yeah, the micro moves are a cool little way to
mhm.
help dig yourself out and elevate out of the trenches.
Well, I wanted to shift a little bit to feedback. So you write about the power of feedback to counteract blame, and you even use the terminology coaching feedback. When you're using this terminology, you seem to be referring to the principal as a coach. So talk to me a little bit more about that.
Well, we try to make a distinction between evaluative feedback and coaching feedback. And this is really based on the work of Stone and Heen
Hmm.
in their book, Thanks for the Feedback. And they talk about that distinction and how it becomes important because teachers are often thinking that working with their formal leaders, that it's evaluative.
Hmm.
And there's a lot at stake when evaluation is involved. And they talk about trying to normalizing coaching feedback by separating the two
Hmm.
and making sure that the conversation is understood that this is a coaching conversation. It's not evaluative in nature. The stakes aren't as high then as in the perception of the receiver. And they make some suggestions that to separate the two, you might, if you have an assistant principal, the assistant principal might formally evaluate, let's say, K to 5 in the building and then coach 6, 7, and 8 teachers and flip that where, the other administrator is going to act in the role as the evaluator and in some instances and a coach in others. And then they offer, and so do we, based on their work, some suggestions of other ideas of how to separate the two. But the key is that coaching feedback is really structured to help people make some decisions based on what we've observed that can help them improve. And it is really different than evaluation. Glenn, I don't know if I covered that really all that great. If you
I
wanted
think you
to.
did a great job. The only thing I'd add is, Dana, if feedback's only given once a semester, for instance, when the end of semester grades come, and the feedback's presented as percentages or a quantitative measure. How is that feedback helpful for a teacher or a school? And I think the point is if we can extend beyond just that evaluative feedback and think about providing more frequent updating on how progress is going and give the supporting skills and strategies as we coach and guide our teams through to higher levels of performance. It's probably more likely to build stronger levels of efficacy.
Hmm. Hmm. What about when instructional coaches partner with a principal in building collective efficacy? How would you recommend they start with that?
I think that's a great partnership. And I think if in schools where they have instructional coaches, they have the potential to really support that transfer to practice. I mean, teachers can learn new knowledge and skills outside the classroom. Usually that happens, but the coach becomes really instrumental in helping them scaffold and providing that, normalizing that coaching feedback. So I think that partnership is when schools have that opportunity to have instructional coaches is extremely important. And Glenn, do you have an instructional? I don't think you have an instructional coach at your school, do you?
We don't have an instructional coach. I think it may be different in the US, Jenny, where that terminology is probably much more prolific. But we have teaching and learning leaders and heads of department and other roles that help support teaching and learning. And I think of actually, when I think of the connection between an instructional coach and a principal, Jenny, I think of your enabling conditions for collective efficacy. And at the outset, having consensus on
Hmm.
the goal of the partnership, I think is critical.
Hmm.
What is the principal hoping to achieve through the use of the instructional coach, and equally, how might the instructional coach value add to to the teams of teachers that they're working with? What's the agreement on what they're working on, and what does that look like?
hmm hmm how about for others, if there's people who are listening who want to focus on collective efficacy as a key driver for school improvement, but aren't quite there yet, what advice would you give to them?
We haven't talked yet about the sources of efficacy, and this
Mhm.
again comes back to the work of Albert Bandura. And I think you kind of alluded to it during one of your questions, and we went off in a different direction.
Mhm.
But Bandura's work shows that there are four sources that shape collective efficacy judgments. The most potent source is when teams succeed. The
Mhm.
second is when they see others that are like them succeed. The third is when they're convinced by a credible and trustworthy other to take a risk and go out on a limb. And the fourth source that influences efficacy judgments are positive emotions. And so we have organized the chapters under each one of those sources. We
Okay.
start with persuasion, we move to emotions, mastery, experiences, and vicarious experiences. And what I think we would encourage people to do is really think about how can we set our teams up for success, where they're succeeding at things that they perceive as challenging, but attributing that success to their efforts and the strategies and the school improvement work. Where can we set up opportunities for people and teams to see others succeed? And if they start to think, well, if they did it, we can do it too. How, as a school leader, can I use persuasion to convince people? And what does that sound like? It's high expectations coupled by positive reassurance,
Mhm.
and then celebrating those small wins to help build those positive affective states, those positive emotions that drive efficacy. The more positive people feel and the less anxiety and stress and worry, the more they're going to be efficacious. And that is what the research shows. So that's a more to the story that people can find in the front matter of our book, in that we introduce each part. Like I said, it's divided into the four parts, and we go into some of that background information that I think is important for people to know. If we aspire to strengthen
Mhm.
efficacy, it becomes important to know how people and teams come to interpret what they're capable of accomplishing.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, again, that's kind of, I get into the research and the psychology, but I promise we get very practical in the text so that people can take that information and then apply it in meaningful ways in
Mhm.
their environments.
I wanted to ask if either of you are going to be at any upcoming events in the fall or winter, if you have any on the calendar, or if you're going to collaborate at any events.
We were just trying to schedule something recently, and our
Mhm.
calendars didn't quite mesh. But I am offering a session with a colleague, Don Smith, in the
Okay.
Chicago area in August, and people can find out information about that event at First Educational Resources.
hmm
If you Google the Jenni Donohoo Center for Collective Efficacy, you'll find there that we're offering a face-to-face session. Um, and I'm not, my calendar's not in front of me right now, but I know it is in August.
Okay.
And First Educational Resources would be advertising that event. It's a good day, interactive, not a sit and get, but a very well um, designed professional development, professional learning event for educators.
And Glenn, do you provide any trainings around Australia or outside of Australia on a regular basis?
No, not on a regular basis. I have my job as a
Mhm.
principal, and that's quite a busy role. But I was recently in the US with Jenny, and I'm in the US again next February. Unfortunately, our calendars didn't meet up so that we could present collaboratively together. But I still continue to read and write about collective efficacy, and I obviously work in a school as well, so I've got that real privilege of being able to practice some of the micro moves at work, And yeah, I'm down here in Australia for any of your Australian listeners. They can find me down under at my school. So yeah.
Are there any challenges that you've encountered since writing the book or in the process of writing the book? Any challenges at your school that in the during the process of writing the book, it has shed a light on using some of the strategies you all write about?
In when you're writing, you do as much reading
Sure.
prior to or as you're writing, and there's just so many great reflective points that you've either forgotten about or you're making a new connection with.
Hmm.
And coming back to your question before about for people not currently thinking about collective efficacy or they're
Hmm.
wanting to build collective efficacy, my advice would be that it happens through doing the work.
Hmm.
There's no kind of outside program that you bring in to boost levels of efficacy. I mean, Jenny and I can speak about it and work with teams on it, but it actually happens through you doing the work,
Hmm.
which is why it's got a great link to your podcast, Dana. Like, if you're in a tough spot or if you're digging yourself out of the trenches,
Hmm.
you'll build collective efficacy as you go. As you're taking each step forwards, if you get your strategy right, you're building efficacy as you do that. So that would be my last little takeaway for your listeners.
That's a great connection, Glenn. And you're exactly spot on. People build efficacy as they work their way out of the trenches and meet with success.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a great conversation today about your work in collaborating on this book, some of the things people can learn and use the book for, and also really how they can work on the job, right, to build collective efficacy in their school when they're having that trench moment, right? So, out of everything, I'd like to ask each of you, what's one thing you'd like people to remember? Jenny, we'll start with you.
What I'd like people to remember is that efficacy is a belief,
Hmm.
first and foremost. Sometimes people miss that. It's not actual ability, but it's a belief in our ability. And those beliefs impact how teams think, feel, motivate themselves, and behave. Where efficacy is established, people will persist and put forth more effort, regardless of the challenges and circumstances. And it is the number one factor, according to John Hattie's visible learning database meta-analysis, that matters most in raising student achievement.
Hmm.
It's too important not to get a good grasp and understanding of what it is to get wrong. Like I worry in education, a lot of things come and go. This is too important to get wrong.
Hmm. Hmm. Glenn, how about you?
And Dana, for me, we were really deliberate when we titled the book "Collective Impact,"
Hmm.
and that's the impact that's achieved when there's a high level of collective efficacy. And if you're a solo operator or you're trying to do it on your own, you're trying to dig your way out of the trenches on your own, you'll go much faster as a group and as a collective. And we really emphasize that notion of collective efficacy essentially as a way of achieving collective impact, and that's impact greater than you can achieve on your own.
Hmm. Hmm. That's so important to remember. It's things that good work like this is not done in silos. That's
Yeah.
be true. Well, where can people connect with you online? We'll start with you, Glenn.
Our book's available on Solution Tree and via Amazon. I'm building a website at the moment. It's slow progress,
Hmm.
but it will be up soon enough. Jenny?
People can find me through First Educational Resources at the Jenni Donohoo Center for Collective Efficacy, or I do have my own website and it's jennidonohoo.com.
Hmm.
And my contact information is on there along with a form that people could fill out and send me an email.
Great. I will make sure those go in the show notes. Well, thank you so much for being on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. It was a pleasure talking with both of you about your book, your work, and how to support teams to work better together and increase student achievement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dana.